Princess Grace of Monaco, Grace Kelly, died today in Monte Carlo of injuries suffered in a fiery car crash.
Grace Kelly was the last star of Hollywood's golden age.
The movies she made are wonderful to see again and again and again.
Her movies and later role as Princess Grace of Monaco established her as an iconic beauty.
A great actress.
You can't believe that, can you?
Great person.
You mustn't say that.
The brightest star in the sky.
But the luminous smile that lit our screens camouflaged an inner sadness.
When she came in, I could feel the unhappiness in her.
She said to me, "My life has been no fairy tale."
Underlying health problems added to her unhappiness.
She said, well, what do you think is going to happen? And that's when I talked about having a heart attack or stroke.
Her death in a car crash at the age of 52 shocked the world.
As to what really happened, who knows? We know she's dead. That's so sad.
Grace Kelly died in a car crash in 1982. Now, she was said to have lost control of her car before it plunged off a mountain road above Monte Carlo. And it was also reported that Grace had suffered a stroke at the wheel.
The car journey gives Grace the chance to continue the conversation.
It has been speculated that she and Stephanie were having a ferocious argument in the car.
As she drives, Grace begins to get a headache.
Whether or not Grace's headache was brought on by an argument, I really can't say. But I can see that it was not a one-off. Some reports suggest she'd been experiencing headaches for years, possibly since the age of 12. Now, unexplained headaches are one of the symptoms of a stroke. The pain is brought on by reduced blood flow to the brain due to either a blood clot or even a ruptured blood vessel.
Monaco in the 1980s is a very different world from the one into which her mother had emerged. Grace Kelly was born in 1929 into a prosperous Philadelphia family. She was the third of 4 children, and in a home with a strict pecking order, she was definitely at the bottom.
They belittled her. She was the least appreciated of the children.
Grace's ambitions didn't fit with her parents' elevated idea of the Kelly family's status.
Her father said that being an actress was step up from being a streetwalker.
Her ambition might have died there had it not been for her uncle.
Her father's brother was the great American playwright George Kelly.
Grace enrolled at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in New York.
Tuition was substantial. She paid for this herself. She would not rely on her family for financial support. And she worked her way through her tuition by getting jobs as a model.
But she hated her performance. But Grace's performance had been good enough to attract the attention of director Alfred Hitchcock. And it was with him that her reputation grew in a period of intense creativity. In 1955, she starred alongside Cary Grant in Hitchcock's more whimsical To Catch a Thief. But rather than having a rest, Grace Kelly was about to sign up for the most significant and grueling role of her life: marriage to Prince Rainier of Monaco. Grace met Rainier in 1955, when she had been at the Cannes Film Festival promoting her film Country Girl.
You can't believe that, can you?
For which Grace had won the Academy Award for Best Actress. Monaco is a principality bordering southern France, best known for its Monte Carlo gambling. Prince Rainier's Grimaldi family have ruled here for 700 years. Romance blossomed between Rainier and Grace, and in April 1956, they were married. It looked like a fairy tale wedding.
She was a world-renowned figure. You were looking at the celebrity wedding of the century. Very, very clear understanding as to what he was getting out of it.
Rainier needed it.
The marriage would raise Monaco's reputation, and transform its finances. Now, 26 years later, in September 1982, Grace is behind the wheel of her car on a twisting mountain road above Monaco. The stresses of Hollywood had disappeared in the rearview mirror. But as Princess Grace of Monaco, she had inherited a whole new set of pressures,
which made her lose control of the car. Now, I want to know if there was an underlying cause for her stroke. And I can see here that there is something significant in her medical history, which might offer an explanation. High blood pressure or hypertension. This is a very significant risk factor for stroke, so I want to know what might have caused Grace Kelly's high blood pressure. In the first instance, I understand she was not a healthy eater.
Grace may have been a princess, but when she got the choice, her diet was pure Philadelphia junk food.
You have this stunning, elegant princess whose favorite meal is like a cheeseburger.
Burgers, blood sausage, fried chicken. Grace's dietary preferences were invariably fattening.
But these were not the only dangers in her lifestyle. I understand that Grace also liked to drink alcohol.
She drank vodka on the rocks, and when we were together, we drank wine.
So I can't entirely rule out alcohol as a possible contributor to her hypertension. And I can see here that her doctors were treating her hypertension, but apparently not successfully.
Her marriage had been sold to the world as a fairy tale. Her life as a princess had proved to be very different.
You've got a young girl from Philadelphia being sort of thrown into the protocols of royalty.
She found herself often exhausted, and she found herself in...
Actually, it was much more transactional than that in some ways.
He had ideas about what a wife should be, how she should act, how she should be as a mother, and he saw himself as the head of everything, really.
Some of the demands that were put on her sort of hark back to sort of Renaissance Italy. She's actually requested to provide a dowry, in effect, of $2 million.
Grace also had to undergo a bizarre pre-marriage medical exam to ensure she could produce an heir. Monaco's continued independence from France had strict conditions.
Renier needed to be the father of an heir. If Monaco did not have an heir, the country would return to France on his death.
Grace passed her medical exam and did her duty by French constitutional law, rapidly producing 2 children, an heir and a spare.
But I can see here that there is something potentially significant in Grace's history of pregnancies.
I said, please listen to me. Get out of this marriage. You're very unhappy. It's not working. Lonely, depressed, lost. Those are the 3 words I would use with her. She was definitely a bird in a gilded cage, and she couldn't get out.
At the end of the session, Grace got up to leave.
And she stood right there in the doorway, and she looked at me and she said, you know, you're amazing, but there's one thing you didn't tell me. I said, what's that? And she said, will I die in a car? Swear to you, will I die in a car? And I said to her, what makes you think you're gonna die in a car? She said, I have a premonition, and I've had it forever. And she said, it'll be on the road in Monaco, going back to the palace.
Frank Andrews' story takes on an even more foreboding quality seen alongside a famous scene in which Grace Kelly appeared in her 1955 film, To Catch a Thief.
The scene is supposed to be the road that she was driving when she crashed. It's really ominous. It's hard to watch that film. Very hard.
it's impossible now to look at that famous scene and not think of Grace Kelly's fate.
There's an old saying that it was meant to happen, or meant to be. It was meant to be from the beginning of your life.
And rather than the comic independence shown by her character in To Catch a Thief, Grace exhibits all the signs of the nervous and unconfident driver that she is.
The only independent witness to what happens next is a truck driver just behind the Rover.
The truck driver said that he saw the car behaving in a bizarre way. He saw the car head towards a bend in the road. No one appears to be braking. The car is completely, as he sees it, out of control.
The car swerved and went over an embankment.
Could hardly believe what he was seeing. It goes straight over the cliff, and it falls 120 feet.
Grace was trapped in the vehicle. Stephanie dragged herself free. Grace Kelly was eventually taken to the hospital in Monaco that had been named after her. The early reports were optimistic.
And yet, within a day, Grace Kelly would be dead, with news of the fatal crash making headlines all over the world. I want to know what happened in those critical hours after she had been admitted to the hospital. Grace had sustained immediate and severe head trauma.
Grace needed a CAT scan of her head to further investigate the trauma. For this, she had to be moved across the city to a private clinic. At this time, the messages coming out of the palace were the CAT scan was finally carried out more than 12 hours after the crash.
There was hemorrhage deep within the brain, strongly indicating that Grace had likely suffered a hemorrhagic stroke, directly related to her long-standing hypertension.
Grace had been looking for a way out, and Prince Rainier had offered that. But her choice had been part of a sad pattern.
When Rainier comes onto the scene, it very much is a love story. But he is a very strong man, the kind of person she's attracted to throughout her life.
It's very sad. Her whole life was spent trying to get the approval of an older man and the love and the affection. But she had affairs with all her co-stars, just about.
One of the patterns that we see is, again, putting the leading men in her life, both literally and metaphorically, their needs first. We can link this back to her childhood and her dad, so that first kind of very strong person in power in her life was her dad. He never gave her that, that reflected love, acceptance, all those things that you'd want to see.
On September 14th, 1982, Prince Rainier is at the hospital. He, Albert, and Caroline have seen the CAT scan images that show Grace has suffered a massive brain injury. There is no hope.
She died on September 14th, 1982, just after 10 o'clock that evening.
Her death was headline news around the world.
Grace Kelly, dead. Great American icon who became a princess that everybody loved and died in a car crash.
Her funeral 4 days later was the biggest public event in Monaco since her wedding 26 years earlier. Grace Kelly had died at a point in her life when, for the first time in years, she had been feeling optimistic about the future and a comeback of sorts.
Grace had plans and projects. The children were growing. Grace was in a very good frame of mind.
The comeback had all started in 1977 with a documentary about the Kirov Ballet, for which she had done the voiceover and an introduction.
In 1923, the year my husband, Prince Rainier, was born, His father, Prince Pierre, offered this theater as a home and sanctuary to a group of young dancers.
And Rainier was dead against that. He said, makes you look too much Hollywood.
The film you're going to see is about the children of Theater Street in Leningrad.
I think that was some kind of an expression of she longed for the glamour days, and she said, I want to do it, and she did it.
Let's discover together, shall we, what makes this possible.
The Children of Theater Street had been nominated for an Oscar. Grace Kelly really did seem to be on the way back.
I think there's something very hopeful.
But in the immediate aftermath of her death, the palace's odd behavior left a feeling of unease. A French police investigation had been shut down. Journalists began to sense another story.
It feels as though Grace Kelly had been laid to rest with a number of unanswered questions, and the most intriguing one being, was Grace actually the driver? I can see that some strange things happened in the immediate aftermath of the accident. It made investigating the cause of it very problematic.
When news of the crash came in, the French police set up an investigation. This was normal procedure. But with Grace fighting for her life, the palace had delivered a note to the investigators pointing out that legally, no member of Renier's family could be interviewed.
In any other investigation, the police would have spoken to the passenger, Stephanie, and they could have tested the driver, Grace, for alcohol and drugs. In due course, her death would have been followed by an autopsy. And none of those things were done in this case.
And the fact that she crawled out of the driver's side would have given rise to a great deal of speculation.
The world's press wanted to know, why would Stephanie be climbing out of the driver's side? Had she been at the wheel? Add this to the fact that Stephanie had not attended her mother's funeral, and you had the makings of a sensational story. But what looked highly suspicious had innocent and mundane origins.
When she died, their press officer was on holiday, and they didn't manage the news in any way at all. It wasn't treated as an accident, more as an administrative problem. I think the palace's intention to protect Stephanie was counterproductive in the sense that it permitted conspiracy theories to flourish.
She would not be pleased if we were to think of her only as this breathtakingly beautiful woman on the screen. To use one of her phrases that she yearned for, she wanted to be a good gal.